Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate on this show so many wonderful people across the great state of Mississippi who are working to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. Today is a bit of a diversion, a Ricky Matthews Show diversion. And I think you'll be, first of all, I think you're going to be entertained, but I think you're mostly going to be intrigued by the conversation that we're going to be having. But many of us, you may have, there's a lot of new people in coastal Mississippi. So some of the, you're listening to this show might not even know the story of Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker back on October the 11th, 1973, and the story they tell about a UFO experience they had around the Ingalls area, Pascagoula River. And so, there's been a lot written about it. I remember seeing a Saturday Night Live skit once that I think may have poked fun at these guys at some point. But it all happened, again, in 1973. I graduated from high school in 1975, so I remembered it. But then, as my career moved along and I became publisher of the Sun Herald, we would do stories from time to time about this, recognizing the anniversary of it, or maybe some new news item would come about, or maybe some segment of a documentary would be about it. But it's been kind of lingering for a long time. It makes you wonder, why does it linger? Why does this story continue to linger? At one time in my life, I used to think that they just made it up and they were just going to have some fun with it. But the further we get along in the timeline here, the more we realize that maybe there's more to it than that. Listen, I'm a big Elon Musk fan. So when Elon Musk said there's no such thing as UFOs, don't you know we would know by now? It makes you wonder. But at the end of the day, man, this notion of UFOs, and particularly this case that happened on October the 11th, 1973, here in coastal Mississippi, is kind of on a global stage today. So with that said, I am thrilled today to be joined by Philip Mantle, who has produced and written a documentary called Pascagoula 73. He's written books. He's had a long history of studying UFOs, and we'll explain to you what some of that history is all about here in just a second. But this new series that you have access to on YouTube, Pascagoula 73 docuseries, I started watching. I haven't finished it yet, but it is incredibly intriguing. And the thing I mentioned to Philip before the show started was the thing that kind of catches you right off the bat is these guys are pretty serious. They're pretty serious about their experience. And we're going to talk about that today. So this is going to be a wonderful diversion, and we're going to put in sort of history's place this whole situation that happened on the Pascagoula River by a tried and true UFO researcher in Philip Mantle. So, Philip, it's a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
Yeah, good morning, Ricky. Nice to speak to you.
Again, I told you I started the documentary before with this conversation and wasn't able to get finished with it, but I saw a lot of it. I saw enough to see that this was a serious conversation for you. And when you talk, what I want to do is I want to kind of frame the docuseries. We'll come back to the specifics of it here in just a second. But when you're talking to people about Pascagoula 73, how do you talk about it? And then what I want to do after that is take a step back a bit and talk a little bit about where you come from and so on. But you're coming to, incidentally, Philip's coming to us from the UK as we speak today. But what's your elevator speech on the docuseries?
Well, it's one of those series that the producer was a gentleman called Darcy Weir in Canada. And Darcy had a good background in this field, not just documentaries, but in this subject matter. And we were able to use documentary evidence from the past and then stuff from today, right up to date, and a mixture in between. So we weren't relying on any one thing. And there are those that have watched it and said, well, I thought I knew everything about the Pascagoula case, but now I've seen this. Certainly not. It changed my mind somewhat. And that's what we hope to do. Say, look, we've found all this information and more. You make of it what you will.
And it's fascinating. It makes you wonder. You did a great job. Y'all did a great job putting that together. Listen, we're coming to the end of this segment, so I don't want to get started on a big discussion about your background and whatever. But was Pascagoula kind of always on your radar screen?
It was. I mean, I started in this subject back in 1980, and in the early 1980s, I read an article in a magazine about the Pascagoula case, and it stuck in my mind from day one, especially the description of the creatures, the beings, whatever you want to call them. They are unique to the Pascagoula case, and I just simply could not get them out of my head. And here I am all these years later, of course. So, yeah, it's just one of those things that you see, and it never left me.
Well, it hasn't left a lot of people. I mean, there's some credibility to this case that has kind of stood the test of time. I'm thinking about, again, October 11th, 1973, you have Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker claim they were abducted by extraterrestrial beings while fishing on the Pascagoula River. And as it has been noted, it's one of the most credible, well-documented UFO cases in history. Is that true, that it actually is one of the most well-documented cases in history?
I think it is. I think that's a fair comment, Ricky. I mean, the two others that stand out in this type of encounter are Betty and Barney Hill in 1961 and then Travis Walton in 1975. Neither of these incidents had independent witnesses. Neither of them, like Charlie and Calvin, were sitting in the sheriff's office a couple of hours later telling them everything that's happened, being recorded secretly as well, hoping that they'd spill the beans that this was some big joke. And of course it wasn't. And since myself and my colleague in the States, Dr. Irina Scott, began our involvement with this about 5-6 years ago now, we have uncovered a wealth of information and, more importantly, Ricky, other independent eyewitnesses from all around the area, including some that were on the opposite side of the river that night and have their own story to tell. And we've revealed most of this, if not all of it, certainly in the docuseries Pascagoula 73, which features Maria Blair's testimony. She's one of the people who was on the other side of the river that night. But we have interviewed and spoken to many more around the area.
Yeah, so new witnesses, in some cases lost recordings. And then what is revealed in the docuseries is really a stunning revelation by Calvin Parker himself.
Absolutely. I mean, the recordings that we've uncovered, sadly, we didn't have time to get them in the documentary. But there was a UFO group there at the time called APRO, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. And their files had been left in limbo for years. But all of a sudden, a couple of years back, we managed to get access to them. And in there is a number of audio recordings that literally were made in the days preceding the encounter. It includes Dr. J. Allen Hynek, the Close Encounters man. You know, he worked on the movie of the same title with Steven Spielberg, and he was there. And you have him interviewing the sheriff, for example. Nobody's ever heard these recordings before. Another gentleman that was there was Dr. Harder, and we have Dr. Harder on recording at a press conference. Again, nobody's heard these, so we've made them available in different formats, so to speak. And like we said, it's the best documented case of its kind. We even have the audio recording of Charles Hickson that night of October the 11th, 1973, being interviewed by Sheriff Fred Diamond and his deputies. So you can hear the story right from the beginning. And then you can track it down the years, Ricky, to see if they changed anything. And of course, they didn't.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. We're gonna continue this conversation. When we come back on the other side, though, what we're going to talk with Philip Mantle about is he's been studying UFOs for more than 40 years. He has served as director of investigation for the British UFO Research Association. He's had other high-profile positions. We're gonna talk about all that when we come back. We'll give you a sense of where Philip comes from, and then for the time we have left, we'll talk more about the Pascagoula case. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're joined by Philip Mantle today, who is a co-writer of what I would refer to as kind of a gripping new docuseries about the October 11th, 1973 UFO experience by Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker over by Ingalls on the Pascagoula River. And the name of the docuseries is Pascagoula 73. And as we were talking about before we went to break, it really is what the docuseries is about is one of the most documented cases in UFO history about their abduction by extraterrestrials that while they were fishing on the Pascagoula River. And, back in the days, people were thinking, man, these guys are crazy. But this case and the evidence has stood the test of time. I think most people believe who are close to this, something happened. And we're going to be talking more with Philip Mantle about that today. But before we go any further, again, welcome to the show, Philip. As I mentioned, you've been involved in UFOs for more than 40 years. Talk about where did this come from? And you're director of investigation for the British UFO Research Association. I want you to talk about that, but give us your background.
Well, you and I must be about the same age, Ricky, because I finished high school in 1974. And there was a number of things I was interested in. One was the space program. I was born in 1958. Astronomy in general I loved. And, of course, the paranormal. All things spooky. And what happened was I read a book on astronomy that had one chapter in it about UFOs, basically dismissing them, which I found rather odd because there were things in the book of an astronomy nature that were bizarre as well and unproven. But nonetheless, it intrigued me. So after I left high school, I had several different jobs. And over the winter of 1978 into 1979, I worked in what was called then West Germany. Couldn't speak a word of the lingo of German, not a word. So I phoned my mum and said, could you send me some books? So a box arrived, and somehow she got hold of a whole range of paperback books all about UFOs. So after I'd finished work of an evening, I'd sit and read about them. And when I came home, I lived in a small place just outside of the city of Leeds in West Yorkshire. And they did then, as they do now, they used to publish an evening newspaper. And it's called the Yorkshire Evening Post. The county we live in is West Yorkshire. And my aunt brought a copy round. She only lived round the corner. And there was an advertisement for the formation of the Yorkshire UFO Society coming that Sunday. So I got a bus. I didn't drive in those days, into Leeds, which is just a couple of miles away. Found the location. There's one of the rooms in there with all this noise of other people in it, and in I went. And this local UFO group had been formed by two brothers, Graham and Mark Birdsall. And I just felt I'd found my niche in life, Ricky. And they had a table full of books that I could buy as well, because in those days, getting hold of them was hard. And we were just fortunate that as we moved into the 1980s, for some reason, we had a lot of UFO reports coming in, and I jumped in with both feet, wanted to know more. And for me, if you can't witness the phenomenon yourself, then the next best thing is to speak to those that have. And that's what I started. Several years later, I joined a national organisation, the British UFO Research Association. I served them in different roles. I was their conference organiser, I was press officer, and I was their director of investigations for a number of years. And based in the US, of course, is the Mutual UFO Network, which is an international organisation. And I also became their representative for England. So I certainly had a busy time. Like yourself, I've been an editor of several magazines and so on. And again, around about the same time, in 2016, I finished the proper job. I used to work for one of the main banks here in the UK, and I set up my own little publishing concern called Flying Disc Press, which publishes books by a variety of authors from different parts of the world, including my own, of course. And it was through Flying Disc Press that I got the rights to republish a book written by Charles Hickson and William Mendez and published in 1983 called UFO Contact at Pascagoula. Now, I knew Charlie had passed away in 2011, but I believed that Calvin Parker was still alive. And it took me a few months, but I found him. All I wanted was an interview, Ricky. Put it in the back of this republished book, bring it up to date. Calvin was very nice, very polite, but it was obvious he wasn't going to tell me a thing. But what I didn't know is, in the background, Calvin had recently been to the funeral of a friend. And as he's coming out of the funeral home, there's a book of condolence, and he writes his name. And those coming behind him see the name, Calvin Parker, and, you know, the old wink, wink, nudge, nudge, pointing. And he was not happy with that. So his wife, Waynette, who'd been with him right from the event back in 1973, she says, "Why don't you write a book? Everybody will know." So he said, "Yes, darling. Yes, dear." No intention of doing it. So he told me this story, and I said, "Oh, if you're going to write a book, then I'll publish it." And I said, why won't you give me an interview? He said, well, whenever I did interviews in the past, the journalist would always add his own bit or change things. So I said, well, I'll write you a contract where I am not allowed to change anything, and we will not publish it until you're satisfied. And we did that, and in 2018, Calvin's first book came out, Pascagoula, The Closest Encounter. And much to our amazement, it was extremely well received. That's how it all happened, Ricky, in a nutshell.
Well, you know, you look back, Philip, and there's always, even today, with all the advanced technology that's around us, people are just generally intrigued by the notion of UFOs. They just are. Has technology changed the nature of the conversations, or are they very similar to what they were even back in the 1970s?
Some things are similar, but other things have changed. We know with technology now, you can manipulate images sat here. Whereas when I first started, you still had to put the film in the camera and wind it on and then click it and then send it to be developed. And so it wasn't impossible, but it's more difficult then to fake things. So technology has changed things. And of course, technology, like we have now, speaking to you, is amazing. And, you know, and I used to speak with Calvin every week on Skype, and then there were still texts and emails in between. Whereas when I first started, if I wanted to contact someone, I had to phone them or write to them, you know, a letter, or get in the car or get on the airplane and go see them. Which of course takes a lot of time. So things are a lot quicker now. And same when you're researching something, you have this technology where you can reach out to a whole number of people in one go. Whereas previously I would be sat there typing a letter, maybe the odd curse when I've realised I've spelt something wrong by the time I've finished it. You can't change it then, but you can now, of course. So we're fortunate because we have this technology now, but what the old technology did, Ricky, was leave a trail of breadcrumbs for us, which if you know where to look off, you ask often enough, you can perhaps find things. And that's what we've been able to do with the Pascagoula case, is find recordings and film and interviews and documents and photographs that we never knew existed before, and talked to a whole range of eyewitnesses who were in that area that night. And we've been able to precisely pinpoint exactly where Charlie and Calvin were because we had witnesses from all around. So we kind of triangulate it. And of course, Charlie and Calvin had no idea.
So interesting. The whole situation is so interesting. Here's this guy in the United Kingdom who's had the roles that you've had along the way, being introduced to UFOs as a young man through paperbacks that your mother provided to you while you were in Germany, and look where you are today. One of the things that hits me, and we'll pick it up here when we get on the other side because we're down to a minute, but one of the things that hits me, and you mentioned it as well, but when you think about how these two men, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker's lives were changed forever as a result of this experience. If these guys were just joking, there would have been a big laugh and they would have moved on. But their lives were literally, the trajectory of everything in their lives changed on that day. And I want to talk a little bit about that, and then we'll jump over and talk about the segments of the Pascagoula 73 docuseries that people can go to YouTube right now and watch. And I think you'll be really intrigued when you do. Okay, when we get back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Philip Mantle, author and publisher. And we're going to continue to talk about this very intriguing case from the Pascagoula River. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. We're joined today by Philip Mantle, who is a publisher and author and have co-written a really intriguing docuseries that's on YouTube now called Pascagoula 73. And it's about this historic case on the Pascagoula River where two men fishing were abducted by extraterrestrial aliens, and it literally changed their life. I got a lot of questions that I'm going to be asking you just about the case and moving forward and all of that, but I am intrigued by what you've learned about how it changed their lives. They never backed off their story. And it's an incredibly dynamic situation in their lives, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, the two guys had grown up together. Their families did. And Charlie was 42 years of age, a veteran of the Army, fought in the Korean War. Calvin was 18, almost 19, a young, tough, hardworking, Mississippi guy from Laurel. And the incident Calvin had got his life already planned out, Ricky. He just got engaged to his childhood sweetheart, Wayne. They were going to get married in November. So he said, wife, job, house, children, grandchildren, retire. That was his life planned. But that night, it was the first day Calvin had moved over from Laurel to work in the shipyard and then go home on a weekend. This was his first day at work at Walker's shipyard, and he had a sense of humor. He said, I got hired, fired, and abducted on the same day, October the 11th, 1973. But it was no laughing matter at the time. When you hear what's known as the secret tape from the sheriff's department, Charlie and Calvin were put in a room and left alone. They didn't know there was a tape recorder in the desk. And the deputy come and got it a few minutes later, thinking, we'll hear them laughing and joking now, but they weren't. I mean, Calvin is literally crawling up the wall. I mean, literally. Within a few weeks, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead. That's fine. Continue.
But he was traumatized. Both of them volunteered to take a polygraph. That was arranged for a few weeks later. And by this time, Calvin had returned home to Laurel and was actually in the hospital. One night he started to shake and he just could not stop. And his brother Ricky took him to the emergency room and he was in hospital for a while. And it literally traumatized him, Ricky. I don't know if people remember, the TV series The Hulk in the 1980s. The Hulk turned into the big green guy, and he's been pursued by a journalist. So he moved from town to town, Dr. Banner, to get out of the way. Well, Calvin did that in real life. Within a year of the incident happening, he joined the Marine Corps, simply to get out of the way. He was caught So he got an honourable discharge. The latest book is Pascagoula Uncovered, and his military documents are all published there for the first time. But he would, with his wife and family, would literally move away. He got fired from one job because his name didn't match his social security number. He was using a false name. And it was only in 2018, when I met him, that he decided to tell his story in full. For the first time, he'd kept a lot of it hidden. Whereas Charlie was quite the opposite. It changed his life as well. But Charlie felt that this was something so important, Ricky, that he must keep it in the public eye. Something big was going to happen. That the beings that they'd encountered were going to help mankind in some way, in a positive manner, in the future. And he wanted everyone to know this. So you could contact Charlie and say, we come and speak at our church hall on Sunday. He would be there, under his own steam, using his own money to get there. And he corresponded with people. Where, on the other hand, Calvin would see Charlie on a TV show and say, I wish he'd shut up talking about it. Let's forget it. It's ruined my life. And Calvin even was suicidal at one point. Took him a long time to tell me that, but he was even suicidal. It was almost like post-traumatic stress disorder that he was suffering from, or something of that nature. So you're right, that whatever the incident was that night, whatever happened to them, changed their lives forever.
Well, what's interesting, what I wanted to ask you specifically was, did either of them, because you mentioned about going to a church on his own dime, but did either of them ever benefit financially at all from their story?
Not at all. I mean, Charlie still continued working. Calvin would work when he wasn't getting fired. And so, they were just your average Joe going to work and earning a living. Charlie wrote a book. It didn't sell that many copies. What Charlie also did, which is rather unique, he made a record, a vinyl record. He didn't sing on it. What he did, he narrated, the account of what happened to them. And he thought that was another way of getting it out into the open. People play records. So I actually have a copy. I have one of the vinyl here. But making money, no, not at all. They never tried anyway. Charlie said that they'd been offered a movie deal at one point, but he turned it down. That's all I know. I can't find any other information about that. It didn't say with whom or where or how much was on offer, but he said he turned it down. But no, they never made any money. Calvin was working right up till, almost he passed away. He was in construction. He took ill and he had to call it a day. But they were just... What I've said about them, Ricky, is these were two ordinary men who encountered the extraordinary. As simple as that.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting? You look back again. I've had the opportunity to sort of immerse myself in what's been written about this. But you think about Sheriff Fred Diamond, and you mentioned it a minute ago when he decided to record them secretly. I thought that was a lot of forethought on his part. I mean, I wonder what gave him the wisdom to say, let's record them secretly and just see if we can, get to the bottom of this hoax immediately. I wonder how many people in his position would make such a decision. But then ultimately the tape and the kind of convincing neighbor of the tape ended up convincing, getting involvement from experts like Dr. J. Allen Hynek and Dr. James Harder that you mentioned earlier, that in many ways kind of helped solidify the case's legitimacy. But wonder what made Sheriff Fred Diamond just decide to record them?
Don't know. It's a good question. But I know once they'd heard the recording, their attitude towards Charlie and Calvin changed, because they let them know that right from the very get-go, if this is a prank that you're pulling, and we find out you're both going to be in big trouble, big trouble. So maybe it was something that, a trick that they did all the time with people, that the recorder was there for a reason. So we've got it at our disposal. Let's use it and see what happens. And of course, You know, they didn't show any signs of fakery or hoaxing or whatever you want to call it. Quite the opposite. And Charlie's saying, you know, they've got to believe us now. You know, I always knew there was something up there. Now they're going to have to believe. What Charlie was concerned about was from his military perspective was, well, what if these guys come back and do this again to somebody else? What if it's an invasion? This is the way his mind worked because, like I said, he was in the military and fought in the Korean War. Calvin was just scared to death. You know, he was 18 years old. I'm not sure he'd ever been outside of Mississippi. He certainly wasn't in the military. And Calvin got home that night. He got in the shower and washed himself with bleach. He found a gallon of bleach and washed himself from head to toe in bleach, just in case he'd been infected in some way. This is how it affected them, Ricky, you know?
So what's, you know, getting to some of the more nitty gritty details that won't steal any of the thunder from the docuseries. What, you know, when we think about the alien stereotype, we picture, and maybe it's movies or, you know, just the way people have described them, and they tend to describe them similarly, these gray figures, and people have that image in their head. But in their case, though, while they were gray, they described them as almost robot-like, like they were being controlled from somewhere else.
I think that was their movements, because their legs never moved. These creatures were humanoid, about 5 foot, 4 inches tall, head, but no neck, so it was bulky. They had pointed protrusions out of the side and one out the front. Their arms were a bit longer. They either had a mitten or pincer-type appendages. Like you said, their skin was grey and wrinkly. They described it as looking a bit like an elephant skin. And not only that, they didn't walk. They hovered or flew or whatever you want to call it, just above the ground. They never made a noise. They didn't hear anything from them. No breathing, no talking. So right from day one, and we know this from the recent audio recordings that we've uncovered, because they talk about it there. These were made in the couple of days afterwards. They right from the get-go, they said, I think these are robots.
Let's do this. We'll pick it up from right there. Yeah, they described it as a foot and a half off the ground. And in one case, one of them got an injury on their arm, and other things happened during the abduction. But when we come back on the other side, we're going to continue the conversation. Talk about Maria Blair, a new figure in all of this. We'll see you after this. Ricky Matthews Show diversion today as we visit with UFO expert, author, producer. I guess he's directed. He's kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to UFOs. But there's a new documentary. We'll talk to you more about how you can see it. I'm in the process of watching it as we speak, called the Pascagoula 73. But it's about the case of Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker being abducted on the Pascagoula River by aliens, a UFO, and the whole 9 yards. And over the many years, it's kind of maintained its credibility over a lot to the extent that you want to lay credibility on their story. It's kind of stood the test of time. What's interesting is, though, you found another character. You mentioned her earlier in the conversation, but Maria Blair, you know, where did she come from?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when Calvin's book came out, he was interviewed, and a little mini documentary was made by a journalist and put online. Somebody grabbed that and put it on YouTube. And I just happened to be reading the comments underneath it, and there was a lot. But someone said, my mum and dad were on the opposite side of the river that night. They saw the UFO. So that grabbed my attention. I managed to find this person, a young lady. I explained who I was. And I said, could I speak to your mum and dad? She said, I will ask. She came back, said, yeah, they are Maria and Jerry Blair. I got their phone number, rang them. I spoke to Maria first, Mrs. Blair. And Mr. Blair, back in 1973, he worked offshore. They used to service the oil rigs. And they were on the opposite side of the river. Their boat was there waiting to take them out, but his boss hadn't come. So they sat in the car. He's not in the best of moods. And then out of nowhere, see this blue thing coming down the river, not in the river, above it. And Maria said it stopped opposite, and it kind of looked as if it was looking for somewhere or it was lost. And then she said, we're on the pier, and there's this huge splash in the water next to her. And out of the water, and these are her words, Ricky, came this grey man. And it was right up to her face. It went back in, didn't come. So she ran down the pier, threw her husband's belongings onto the boat, and then turned and ran back. Now, it was about 9 o'clock. But when she got back to the car, it was midnight. And it wasn't a 3-hour stretch to get back to the car. So she talked to her husband a few days later when he came back, and he said, don't tell anybody. You know, they'll all think we're nuts. She'd seen Charlie and Calvin on local television, and like you said, some people poking fun at them as well. So they said nothing. The only people they told were their 2 daughters, and it was the youngest who put that comment on YouTube. But Mrs. Blair Maria, she said, I can see something else out of my peripheral vision, but I can't quite make it out. I don't understand what it is. Anyway, a local charity in the town eventually raised some money and put a historical marker near the place. And Maria and Jerry turned up at that, and that's when they first met Calvin, and they told the local media about seeing this blue thing, not the grey man. Mr. Blair, unfortunately, took seriously ill, and he was in the hospital, and he made his wife Maria phone me on the mobile. And he said, Mr. Mantle, I lied. I saw everything. You know, I denied it all this time. I saw everything. So his wife Maria said, despite him being ill, she said, you've got some talking to do, mister. And he was terminally ill, so his days, unfortunately, were numbered. And he said, no, we too had an encounter that night with the same beings. And as he's describing it to her, Maria says, I'm not actually seeing things out of my peripheral vision. I've actually got my eyes almost shut. That's why I can't see what's happening. But she says, I'm able to look to the left, and I can see my husband, Jerry, with 2 of these creatures. And, wow. You know, there's a lot more to that. We also, as you know, put her under hypnosis, and more details came out through that as well.
Well, what we'll do, we're kind of out of time for today, but in the early viewings that I've done, I will say that what's interesting is the intrigue of the encounter. It's interesting the way you've also sort of balanced that with the human experience. And that's where I get this sense that their lives changed as a result, and they really believe what they're saying and so on. It's a terrific sort of balancing act that you guys did in developing Pascagoula 73. But people can go to YouTube. Just go to YouTube and look it up. You can see it. Just put Pascagoula 73 in the search bar and you'll find it. But it's also available on Amazon Prime, right, Philip?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're a Prime subscriber, it's free. No matter where you are, you can watch it free of charge. Yes.
Very intriguing story. Like I said, this is a Ricky Matthews Show diversion today. But Philip, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
Thank you, Ricky. The pleasure's all mine, I can assure you.
I predict this will be a well-listened to, well-watched show. It's just one of those interesting shows that people want to know more about. It's been a pleasure to spend some time with you. Thanks for coming to us from the United Kingdom today. We really appreciate it. Listen, have a great day, and stay away from any UFO encounters. But if you do, I know the man who would want to talk to you, Philip Mantle. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.